Oh. Hariom, a joyous new year, a joyous Sankranti, and greetings from Niagara Falls. When I was growing up, all that I'd learned about our Earth is that our Earth is like a mother, Mother Nature. She changes the colors of the leaves in autumn. As my education continued, what I learned about our Earth is the importance of the three R's: reduce, reuse, recycle. When I became more conscious, less forced education, but more of my own volition about what our Earth is and what is happening to her, I learned about the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. How many of you know about this? The Great Pacific Garbage Patch. It's also casually known as the Trash Island or the Plastic Island. And fast forwarding more, one of the strongest learnings in terms of the Earth for me was when I had listened to a podcast where they shared Sanatana Dharma or Hinduism will be the first religion affected by global warming. And I've heard how our rishis back in the day, they would worship the air and fire and so on. But maybe I thought that was more mythology than theology. Maybe I felt that. But as I continued to reflect, and when I came across this insight, it was very triggering for me. What I'm trying to share here is from being a kid to being an adult, my touch points for the earth were becoming more negative. From Mother Earth to global warming, my relationship with the earth was becoming more real. From a story to that which is affecting my religion. And so, what I felt in my heart, and I know you feel the same way, that all of these happenings are a call for more awareness, a call for more action. And so, in January of 2022, when all of us were still sort of on a pause, we had the space and the time to reflect more on life. This is when we commenced our Prithvi Seva Sangha, which we later rebranded as Loving Earth Sangha for those who don't have a Sanskrit orientation. Over the past 4 years, we have given a lot to our earth. A lot in terms of resources towards charities that are planting trees and cleaning water. Time. Lots of time on learning about microplastics and ultra-processed food. And effort. Last year, we had a lifestyle tracker. All of the things we can do to love our earth more and whether we're following through with this. And now as we flow into our 5th year, I have this feeling, and I hope you do too, that all that we've given over the past 4 years is not enough. It will never be enough for how much our earth loves us. And so we continue. We continue to try our best. Now, the vision for our 5th year. Whatever you feel to be precious, you tend to be more careful, more caring with that. Yes? If you have a metal plate and you're walking on ice, so what? But if you have a precious plate that someone had made for you who's no longer alive and you're walking on that ice, then you're going to be much more careful and caring of that plate. Agreed? And so my hope, my aspiration for this year is for me to feel more and for you to feel more that our earth is our God. I'm not saying God-like or like God. I am sharing our earth is our God. And the way I hope for us to feel this is by reflecting on Ganga Stotra. I didn't say sing it. I didn't say study it. I said reflect on Ganga Stotra. For me, it started off as singing. When I was in the Vedanta course, living at Sandipani, then in our mandir, the prime icon is Bhagwan Jagadishvara. In other words, the master of the multiverse. And when you face him on his right, our right, so it would be his left, there is an icon of Bhagavati Ganga. And so in the evenings, when we would offer Arti, we would sing Arti towards Jagadishvara, and then we would sing Ganga Stotram. And so that was my relationship. It was listening to my batchmates sing, and then eventually I did sing too. And as the course went on, then that singing went to studying. We learned every word, every verse of the Ganga Stotram. So for me, it was singing and studying, but in our community, we want to take this to the next level, which is to reflect on this. How does this relate to us? The way our earth loves us, how can we love back? The Ganga Stotra has been authored by Acharya Shankara, the same Acharya Shankara that for us has composed Moha Mudgara, Atma Bodha, and so on. The Ganga Stotra is 14 verses. I believe in 2026 we have 4 Loving Earth workshops, and so my plan is to cover 3 to 4 verses per workshop. This is going to be the flow. The reason why Acharya Shankara invoked Bhagavati Ganga in our exploration of a avatara. Avatara is when divinity manifests. Divinity manifests for us typically for 2 reasons. Typically, to protect the virtuous and to correct the vicious. Now, Bhagavati Ganga is an avatara. It is divinity that comes into our lives in the form of Mother Earth, in the form of a sacred river. For those who are vicious, she pushes us out of that viciousness by purifying us. Can you please share with me in the chat a vice that has been bothering you more of late? And I'm not saying someone else's vice. I'm saying your own vice that's been bothering you more of late. What do you wish you could grow out of faster? Please share. Procrastination. Yes. Greed. Impatience. Surely. So I'm not going to holistically say we're vicious, but we do have vices. And she is one who can purify these vices to become virtues. Now, for those who are virtuous, What does Bhagavati Ganga do for us? She can free us. Even virtues imply separation, imply a lack of infinity, because if I'm patient with you. If I'm caring with you. But beyond virtues is peace. So with the same thought flow, can you all share with me a virtue that you have? A virtue that you're feeling really good about, that you're noticing more lately? Someone shared with me recently that they've learned how to absorb much more rather than be opinionated. Kindness, compassion, right on. She can make these virtues solid for us so that we don't have to think about this. We don't have to put in effort. We just naturally live like this. Final personal feeling towards Ganga Stotram before I get into some verses proper. The origin of the Ganga is a space called Gaumukh. It is like the mouth where the Ganga comes from. When I had finished my first year of university, I don't think my parents wanted me to stay at home. So they sent me and a good friend of mine I grew up with to the Himalayas and said, go hike. And so when I was 18, I actually completed the Char Dham Yatra. I went to Badrinath, I went to Kedarnath, I went to Yamunotri, and to Gomukh. So Gangotri to Gomukh. But when I did this, I really just did it for hiking. It was just young people who want to be in nature. But now in our community, for those who are joining for Meaningful Mornings, we are going to reflect on how Bhagavati Ganga is the mother of Acharya Bhishma. And for some of us, we're going to the Char Dham Yatra soon. We would have completed this in 4 months. So how amazing of an investment or a relationship our community has with Bhagavati Ganga. And so we begin. I'm going to chant, and then I'm going to explain. Verse 1. Devi Sureshwari Bhagavati Gange Tribhuvanatarini Taralatarange Shankara Mauli Viharini Vimale Mama Matirastam Tava Pada Kamale. Joy. The first quarter. Devi. Here, our Mother Ganga is being related to at a human level. Like so many of you identify as Devis. We call you our Devi Sangha. But then there's another dimension that's mentioned, Sureshwari. She is not just the greatest amongst humans, she is also the greatest amongst the Suras. That is not the dimension of earth, but the dimension of heaven. But she's beyond that too. She is Bhagavati. Bhagavati is another way to describe Bhagavan, which means the one who has all virtues in all ways. So she is divinity. She is Shanti. And we are offering to her, hence the Gange. The word is Ganga, but Gange means it's a Sanskrit declination where we're sharing everything that we're singing about is offered to you. Now, the word Ganga, in a simplistic way, comes from the root gum. I'm not saying gum like you're chewing gum. G-A-M. Gum means that which is swift. So naturally, rivers flow swiftly. But more philosophical than this is Gamanat Ananga iti Ganga. Gamanat means which comes to us. Ananga means without form. Now, the implication of this is for humans, they tend to only respect and love humans. For some, maybe a pet. For some, maybe a plant. But this is divinity that has come to us in the form of an element that is water. Gamanat Ananga. Now, continuing. Tribhuvana Tarini, the Tribhuvana that we live in, this is essentially the three limits that we have, are our experiences like shoveling the snow. It's left a lot of trauma on me today. Our equipments, that shoveling is happening by biceps and quadriceps and stuff like that. And the deepest of these limits is the ego that keeps talking about how much one is shoveled. Yes? So experiences and equipments and ego. And she is one who, Tarini, can help us to feel that we're more than these limits. We are existence. Now, how can she help us do this? Tarala means water. And tarange means wave. Water and wave. So water in the form of waves. In our culture, water is synonymous with knowledge. And waves here symbolize steadiness. For those who are steady with knowledge, then they do feel that they are more than their experiences, equipments, ego. All of that is just in the first line of Ganga Stotra. Now I'm continuing into the second line. Shankara Mauli. Now, there's many people who speak Marathi, and Mauli sounds like the word mother, but Mauli also means the one who's the crown of, on top of. So Shankara Mauli, that means she is the one who's in the crown or on the top of Bhagwan Shiva. Have all of you seen that image before where she's flowing? Viharini, and she loves being there. That's like her rest and recreation area. Who wouldn't want to be in Bhagwan Shiva's hair? And this is why she is Vimale. Because she is in Bhagwan Shiva's hair, she is pure, and that which is pure can cause us to be pure, cause us to be free. Only the pure can be purifying. And knowing all of this about her, Mama, that is my mati, my mind, my thinking, astam, may they be established. Established in what? Tava pada kamale. May they be established at Bhagavati Ganga's feet. Reflecting a little bit on this final quarter is a prayer. It is a prayer to our Divine Mother that our thoughts aren't random, but we think about her. As you think, so you develop. And I love the play here between Mama and Tava. May this sense of myness be offered to you. I'm going to take up one more verse, even though I was supposed to take up two, but I'm going to go through one more. Bhagirati Sukadaini Mata Tava Jala Mahima Nigame Khyata Naham Jane Tava Mahimanam Pahi Kripamai Mama Jnanam. Joy. There's a whole lot of depth to this quarter, especially for those who have studied Srimad Bhagavatam. Bhagirati is another name for Ganga. Now, this really means Bhagirati's child. Bhagirati's child becomes Bhagirati. Everyone's with me? What is Shri Krishna's father's name? Vasudeva. The child of Vasudeva becomes Vasudeva. This is me pretending like I know Sanskrit. Just pretending, okay? So, Bhagirata was this great bhakta who was so dedicated to the culture of the country. So, one of his family members, his name is Raja Sagara. Sagara. And many of Raja Sagara's family members had passed away. And the only way to revive them was if the sacred river Ganga came from the heavens to earth. Everyone's with me? Now, this great dedicated seeker, Bhagirata, he showed his dedication firstly to Bhagwan Narayana. What was happening in the highest dimensions is Bhagwan Narayana is the creator, his manager, that is Bhagwan Brahma, was offering Pada Puja to Bhagwan Narayana. Okay, so imagine Bhagwan Brahma has this vessel with this water, and he's offering this water to the feet, to the toe of Bhagwan Narayana. Now, what happens to that water? That water is washing Bhagwan Narayana's feet, and just imagine the power of that. And now that starts to flow down from that dimension, and this is caught in Bhagwan Shiva's hair. And from Bhagwan Shiva's hair, then it came to us. And when the sacred river came to earth, all of these family members who had passed away, they were all revived. And that's why she is the Sukadayini, the one who brought great peace to Raja Bhagirata, to Raja Sagara. And there's a whole lot of depth to this, but the implication, at least for now, is the flow of this river from Bhagwan Narayana to Bhagwan Shiva to us implies we have to go from listening to reflecting to contemplating. From listening to reflecting to contemplating, that will bring us peace like a mata. Here, I don't want us to mix mata with just our biological mother. It is the mother-likeness. We all have biological mothers. And for some, we have great relationships with our mothers. For some, there's not. But there's always someone, especially for those who have a guide, where they're mother-like to you. And you can just be you with them. Okay, I'm just going to finish the first line and then I'll pause. Tava jala mahima nigame khyata. Your jala, that is the waters, the mahima of your jala, that is the glory of your waters, nigame khyataha, the scriptures know about this. Know about this. What this means for us is, here jala is synonymous with jnana. I've already told you about that. The water is synonymous with knowledge. Not IQ, but SQ. But the mahima, the glory, is when that knowledge becomes yours, and that process is called contemplation or dhyana. It is that which transforms one. And the scriptures know this because the scriptures do the same. So Ganga Stotram and our maps of self-development are synonymous. Lots and lots and lots more to learn about how Earth is God. This sacred river is most definitely our Divine Mother. As we continue to learn about sacred waters, In advance, I'm sharing with everyone your Ram. This is your reflection adventure of the month. And that is, I want you to listen to Ganga Stotra by Pandit Jasraj every day, like we were just listening to. Out of all of the versions of Ganga Stotra that I've come across, this I find to be the most passionate. And as you're listening to this, try to learn to sing this, especially knowing the meaning or the reflecting that we've done. Maybe in our next workshop, I'll randomly pick people who will have to sing this, and then other random people will have to explain this. There's 55 of us joining, almost 60 of us. And that will come down to 6, the team and me. And I pause, and we continue with our team.
Okay, Hariom, everyone. I think we're going to just dive in. Gratitude to Vivek ji for getting us started in what will be a really positive year of reflecting altogether. Um, Also, welcome to my parents. I see you in the Zoom, and also like welcome to some coworkers and friends who are joining our Loving Earth community for the first time. For those of you who I have met or haven't met, my name is Nina. I am a seeker based in Boston, though I grew up in Grand Blanc, Michigan. Professionally, my background is both in public health and I and in social work, and I currently practice as a therapist. And so that is some of the secular experience that I'm bringing into our space today. I'm excited to dive into this topic. It's one that means a lot to me, and I know a lot to all of you. But before we begin, I just want to take a minute to acknowledge the original water protectors. I personally live, work, and tend community on the stolen and unceded traditional lands of the Massachusetts, Pawtucket, Wampanoag, and Nipmuc peoples, colonially known as Boston, Massachusetts. I am a guest here on these lands, and so I personally give financial contributions to the original and ongoing native stewards of this land, like a guest would bring a gift to their host. I think it's really important to ground us in a land acknowledgement that names both the past and presentness of our First Nations communities in the US and Canada. Um, and especially since we are being guided by a text that is rooted in the divine. So too are our Native communities and Native stewards. For those who have done a workshop with me before in a different context, some of these principles will be really familiar too. But I want to create a little bit of a container so that we can move through this with a lot of care. Climate, we can have a lot of climate emotions. This is a space to invite curiosity and compassion. You don't have to know all the answers about the topics we're engaging in order to care about what we're engaging in. I want you to have space to move slowly through big feelings. Notice the kind of topics that bring up questions, that bring up discomfort, and participate with presence. The chat is a beautiful way to connect, and I'm going to try my best to track what's happening in the chat as we speak. Okay? Um, okay, diving in. First, chat, just to get us a little bit warmed up. What are the current feelings you're holding about water, water scarcity, water crises? Pick an emotion or two that you notice on the wheel. I just want to do a little bit of a quick pulse check to see just where we're landing today, what we're feeling. Rage, powerlessness, loss, gratitude, guilt, overwhelm, worry, frustration, interest, gratitude, disappointment. Yeah, there's a lot of different kinds of emotions that come up when we think about our climate, when we think about our environment. And I just want you to notice that they have some more positive valences like gratitude, and they have some more that are challenging to hold, whether it's the loss or the feelings of guilt or overwhelm. But they all kind of coexist in the circle. And I think part of the work we're doing together is actually naming that we can hold multiple of these feelings at the same time. This is a beautiful feelings wheel from a resource called Climate Mental Health. And you might want to explore that in your own time, but I just want us to continue inviting those feelings as we talk specifically around water access. Another little bit of a warm-up question. We're gonna slowly dip our toes into talking about this. Why is water quote unquote scarce anyway? I'm not, and I'm just going to name, I am not an expert in this. I'm coming to this from like uh, adjacent disciplines. So actually, a lot of you who I know are in this call probably know way more than I do on this topic. Why is water scarce anyway? Agriculture and food waste, climate change, wastage, uh-huh, we waste, cattle, limited freshwater bodies, access, commodification. Yeah, these are a lot of beautiful answers. Um, the one thing I want to underscore that is connecting all of those answers is that people are the reason water is scarce. Like water scarcity and doesn't like the word itself doesn't water isn't just naturally scarce necessarily. Okay, who is making it scarce? We are making it scarce through our decisions. And so I just want to also pay attention a little bit to our language that we're using on this topic that um and to bring ourselves, our full accountable selves into this issue that water isn't just scarce magically. We play a role in how water is being used, where it's being distributed, when it's being over extracted. Okay. And I want to now going to dive a little bit into like climate and mental health to get us situated before we go into some case examples. Um, there's a couple ways you can slice and dice this, okay? We can talk about the direct effects of climate change, the intersectional effects of climate change, and indirect effects of climate change. And I'll walk through all three, okay? Um, and you can also read along on the screen if you're more of a visual thinker in that way. So direct effects are like thinking about direct exposure to heat, floods, droughts, cyclones, hurricanes. Intersectional effects are the types of things that kind of um, come to the forefront due to social inequality, exclusion, isolation, discrimination. This is where we might put experiences of environmental racism, for example. Indirect effects might be thinking about how it impacts gender-based violence, migration, displacement, conflict, housing, water scarcity in terms of our what is available in a specific community. And then all three of these directions in different ways can clinically affect us in terms of our mental health. And I'm just going to say this that like not every single experience of climate change is directly related to like some diagnosis of depression or anxiety, but just to name that it's like very normal through a whole host of interconnected reasons for people to have experienced impacts on their mental health and well-being. After all, we live in an environment, for many people, their livelihood is dependent on the environment. Um, and I think an example that really brings this home, um, well, actually, it looks like I did agricultural suicides first. So we're going to do agricultural suicides first rather than talk about the Flint water crisis. Okay, just as a heads up, as you can probably gather here, the case example of agricultural suicides, I will be talking about death by suicide. If you need to take some space and this is a tender topic for you, um, I trust you to know you, to take your space. And I just also want to name it's really important for us to talk about death by suicide. The more we talk about it, the less taboo it is. And suicide is a very preventable thing. Um, more on that a little bit later. But I want to zoom in specifically about um, how the whoop, intersectional effects and like all three, direct, intersectional, and indirect, show up specifically in the context of agricultural suicides in India. I'm using the distinction of agricultural suicides in particular because that includes both farmers, people who own land, and also agriculture laborers, the people who often work the land but may not own the land. Okay. Um, the Loving Earth team is a fabulous team. One, I just need to say that so you guys can hear that. The group that brings this community together is so dedicated and wonderful. And one of the examples, as we were like pulling together this workshop, that they shared with me was the story of Kailash Arjun Nagre, who is a 43-year-old farmer based in Maharashtra, and he died by suicide in March 2025. Um, and it's pretty common. India is one of the few places in which pesticides are a cause of death for deaths by suicide, and specifically in the letter that he left the people around him, he named um, the lack of water and water shortages that affected his ability to tend to the land. And this was a man, and this is a photo from 2020 when he was acknowledged by the government as a Yuva Kisan, like he was acknowledged as a budding young farmer contributing to his community. This is sort of the severity of the issue, and India is not the only place where farmer suicides happen. They also are a growing concern here in North America. But I want to also ground us into a story such that um, we can feel more deeply into it. And just again, to be like really clear about what this impact looks like numerically, the issue we're experiencing right now in Bharat is one person in the agricultural sector, farmers and laborers, die by suicide per hour. And based on the most recent data that's available, most of those deaths have taken place in Maharashtra and Karnataka. And they've recorded suicide rates that are 2.5 times the national average since the 1990s. Um, and there has been some decline recently, but it's still a pretty high rate that and pretty tragic. And I want to like thread the needle a little bit between climate, mental health, and then I'll show this by two maps. Here is a map from the World Resources Institute from their 2023 report on looking at water stress globally. And they're defining this as they're defining extremely high, that like dark red that you see, as when they're regularly using up almost their entire available water supply. And they were naming 1/4 of the global population face this extremely high water stress each year. And you can see what it looks like in India. And I'm going to go to the next slide, and I want you to see, okay, most of this, we're seeing some in the north here, we're seeing some south here, and then you can see where um, the kind of the hot patches in terms of suicides attributable to warming. You're seeing some in Punjab, and you're seeing some um, in South India. So you can kind of pretty clearly see, just even on a snapshot of a map, um, that the way our environment is changing is deeply affecting the people. And particularly in a country where so many people make their livelihood from the agricultural sector. And here I want to underscore that this is more than an issue of just an individual dying by suicide. It's something that is tied to like what I like to call, not I like to call people in all across public health like to call it. I'm not I'm not the originator of this idea, but the social determinants of health, right? That um, the context in that which we live, our communities, the society, the norms around trade, the economy, where we live, where we go to school, all of that deeply affect our individual experience of health. And if you want to take a look at this at a Vedantic lens, you might want to see that, oh, this is actually pretty close to the four ashramas, and that you go from the individual to the family to community to society. Um, so maybe public health got it from Sanatana Dharma. I don't know. Maybe Vivekji will make that claim in the future, but you can see there's some linkages between these different disciplines and ways of seeing the world, which I find really beautiful. Okay, but some of the contextual factor here are around all of this. The Green Revolution and how that affected how rice is grown in Bharat. Suicides jumped when India joined the World Trade Organization in 1995. So there's something around the dynamic around the flow of trade and resources globally, which are often at the detriment of countries within the global south, including India. There's a debt burden to consider specifically on farmers. So as our environment continues to warm, um, it takes a lot more water to resource the fields. There's a lot more inputs going into things to make crops more productive, right? Increased pesticides, which extract further from the earth, and people have to take out even more loans to even get the seeds that might be climate resistant. But those climate resistant seeds aren't producing always in the same ways. Specifically, the failure of BT cotton. Is one thing that came up pretty regularly across the paper about like this this cotton that was supposed to be climate resistant. And cotton is the most water intensive crop you could grow. Like we like to wear it because it's airy and breathable and quote unquote sustainable, but it uses so much water. So it's not really that sustainable. Okay. But that affects people, right? Like imagine that you have to, whatever you make is whatever is sustaining your family. And you can't predict monsoons giving you enough rain in the same way. The land is getting degraded because you're trying to like eke out as much crop as possible. And then particularly for laborers, um, they're really dependent on the seasonality of the work. And now the patterns of the seasons are changing, which is also meaning um, there's more, how do I say it, like irregularity in wages and how often they're being compensated. So you're seeing a lot of different things happening from different areas, right? And again, the through line I want to note is these are not decisions that were magically happening. These are not decisions that are magically happening. Who makes decisions? People are making decisions of how much things cost, um, of what policies are in place to either help farmers ease into maybe changing their profession into something that is more long-term sustainable for thinking about water management as communities and societies grow. Um, this is quote unquote where like the society and community layer really come into play. Okay. Again, I just want to underscore this, and I think this is something that I think is really important in any presentation that we talk about mental health, particularly suicide. If you're struggling, you're not alone, and you deserve support that supports your dignity and autonomy. Okay? Um, if you know me personally, message me. I'm happy to connect you to resources. I cannot be your therapist, unfortunately, but I can connect you to resources. And if you're interested in any crisis lines or you know anyone who might benefit from a crisis line, ones that avoid the police are inclusivetherapists.com/crisis. There's a whole list there. Okay. I want you to keep this in mind as people who are also talking about these things in your communities, is that, like Zui mentioned, we say death by suicide, not committed suicide. We also always provide resources when we talk about it. Okay. Anyway, so case one is we're talking about like these interconnected global examples in Bharat. Case two, oh, okay, it's a Flint water crisis. We'll see if I have enough time to talk about water bankruptcy, but we shall see. This is an ambitious presentation. The Loving Earth team was like, let's talk about climate mental health, two really big case examples, and maybe how we can solve it. And I'm like, okay, So here we are. The Flint water crisis, though, is incredibly personal to me. I grew up in Grand Blanc, Michigan, which is a suburb of Flint, Michigan. I attended Chinmay Mission at Chinmay Mission Flint, Tapovan. Some of you may have visited or go there regularly yourself. I did Bharatanatyam classes growing up in Flint. I went to the mall and the movie theater there. We would do celebrate Gandhi Jayanti at UFM Flint. Um, in the fall. Uh, this is just to say that Flint was a part of my life, even though I didn't directly live in the city, nor was I directly impacted by the water crisis. I just want to hold both of those things, but it's something I care about a lot. And here you're seeing Flint water versus Detroit water. And this is an image that went pretty viral um, during that time because of community activists. Okay. Okay. Just a little bit of the timeline. I want you to hear this. Again, it underscores the role of people and policy in shaping our experience of water scarcity and water access. So in 2011, the state of Michigan put Flint under emergency financial management. And so this is the second time that happened in Flint's history. And essentially, this means with the emergency financial manager, um, they override the political decisions of the residents of the community, right? So at this time, it really didn't matter what community had to say about the policies that were taking place because the city's decision-making processes were under the auspices of someone that was just not randomly appointed, but essentially randomly appointed by the state. And Flint at that time had one of the highest water bills, like in terms of municipal utilities, one of the highest water bills across the United States, not just in Michigan, across the United States. And in light of all of this and the hope of saving people money, even though this did not bear to be true, the financial manager decided to shift Flint's water resources from the Detroit River to the Flint River, was known to be polluted. Very shortly thereafter, residents started reporting water smelled, there was rashes, there was hair loss. Um, and through the community organizing of the population, which was very coalitional, we're talking about churches, we're talking about individual residents who were trying to get the attention of academics in the state, who they couldn't get their attention at first. They used to go to city council meetings. They would be bringing these samples of water. They would be doing community mapping, collecting data and symptoms, crowdsourcing these images from residents across the Flint area until the academics got involved. So a team from Virginia Tech did testing of the water in Flint. Dr. Mona Atisha did some research on the lead levels in children at like shortly thereafter, and both concluded that citizens of Flint were being exposed to lead via the water. And just to underscore that, like, lead at any level is dangerous for particularly child's development. As of 2025, the pipes have been finally replaced. It took 11 years to get there. But Flint families have not received any of the $600 million settlement that was approved in 2021. Can you imagine 11 years later, there's no financial compensation for the impact on your health, your livelihood? Studies also have shown that there's been 8% increase in the number of school-age children in Flint who have a special educational need, right? So if lead is in the water, in the blood system, that affects how brains develop. And like Rachna ji is mentioning, all that lead harm was done, you can't just take it back. You can't reverse it, right? There's no like a quote unquote rehabilitation that can be done. And then just zooming into a little bit of the mental health data, 5 years into the crisis, like 1 in 5 residents had met the criteria for clinical depression. And there's ongoing research being done in the area around children in the long run, of course. Flint children have higher rates of anxiety and depression than other children in Michigan. And there's again, a whole map of reasons why that can be the case. But a large part of it is, can you imagine like turning on your tap and not being able to trust if you can wash your hands under it, like particularly during the pandemic, for example, or or if you're feeling thirsty that you can just drink water, or maybe even to just shower, like um and all of we often decry, oh, use a reusable water bottle, but the only thing that people could use was bottled water. Yeah. So just naming, yeah, many are pe people are still using bottled water. And also, like, if this can happen in the US, what is the condition in other countries? That's true. Like, um, you know, I think we like to think the United States and North America in general is like not excluded from these things, which is why I think it's important to situate both the example from India and the example from the United States. And also, like, there's stuff happening in Canada, my Canadian friends. You have a First Nations community that has been under a water boil advisory for 31 years. Can you imagine? Anyway, so there's a lot happening everywhere. And again, these are things that are based on individual decisions. Okay, I'm a little bit academic, so I'm going to introduce you to some words. And one of the words that I want to introduce you to is called necropolitics. And it's by a Cameroonian philosopher, Achille Mbembe, who said that the necropolitics is the capacity to define who matters and who does not, who is disposable and who is not. And I think that really comes very clearly in both of these examples. Um, Reports about the Flint water crisis showed the dynamics of environmental racism. Flint, and I didn't say this quite clearly before, Flint is a predominantly Black city. Um, Communities of color predominantly live in Flint. Most of the wealthier um, populations live outside of Flint in places like Grand Blanc, where I grew up, which was a middle class suburb. Um, in Bharat, when we're thinking about who matters, who doesn't, um, think about who banks decide to loan money to and not, who owns the land they farm on and not, um, and the consequences of not paying back those loans. Those are often dramatized in Bollywood movies and things like that, but it is actually a lived experience of many people. Um, and the and who again, it's people making decisions about policy that affect who matters and not, right? Okay, I'm going to walk through the slide just very quickly. If not for the people, things wouldn't have happened. And if there's anything I want you to take away from this is one, we make decisions about policies. They don't emerge from nowhere. And then two, people have a lot of agency around ways to respond outside of that system. And in Flint, that looked like crowdsourcing information from different people. You see a map on the right where they constructed images of water and posts from folks who were affected. They leaned on the resourcefulness of like Flint was one of the places that had the first auto strikes, right? There was a 44-day UAW strike in the 1930s that laid the foundation for how unions function in the state. Um, Building really robust community connections, like churches were collaborating with nonprofits. Nonprofits were collaborating with foundations. You're seeing this a lot right now in Minneapolis, where like um, there's an increased uh, amount of state violence against the people in Minnesota. And you're seeing groups of people who are very different from each other finding connections, actually finding points of connection in their difference. They brought in external experts from the Virginia Tech, and they also really engaged in consistent public action. Things that I didn't mention is that they had done a march from Detroit to Flint, linking the impacts of how water scarcity was experienced in both of those places together. Protests, handing more than 26,000 signatures delivered to the governor. So even though things are still hard, can you imagine what it would have been like if people of Flint didn't gather together like this? Like that's something I like sometimes I think about and get chills considering. Um, okay. I think I have enough time. Well, let's see. Let's see how many things I have, guys, and then we'll decide whether or not I have enough time. Rita, I might need a second workshop because I also want you to feel like you have tools um, that move from, you just took in a lot of climate information and like the kind of really hard impacts on the people. But I want you to know that there's ways that it's connected into things that we can do deeply. I'm going to hold off on the liberation health triangle. Maybe we can do that together in the future. But it's an exercise and a framework that allows us to look at any social issue and see um, but specifically mental health issues, and acknowledge how different intersecting, interconnected factors, uh, whether it's the institution, like policy, cultural factors, like taboos around mental health, personal factors like family dynamics and having to put food on the table, for example, shape someone's experience of their mental health. So you can see that in a context of farmer suicides, for example, there's different factors that would fall in each of these categories. And when you see that there's factors in each of these categories, what feels like an individual problem, for example, depression or anxiety or PTSD, is actually something that's way more complex, that is attached to a broader social structure. And when we acknowledge that, it gives us a lot more flexibility for thinking about how to support people. Maybe it's therapy, but it actually, when you consider the whole landscape of things, it's a lot of stuff that isn't therapy. Like it's being together in community, like we are here, for example. It is going to city council meetings. It's dot, dot, dot. There's a lot of other kind of possibilities that emerge. So that's the usefulness of the liberation health triangle. And um, it is something that comes out of Boston University in particular in their School of Social Work. Okay. This is actually the few thoughts I want to leave on. And I appreciate if I go 1 or 2 minutes over, apologies, forgive me. Um, I want us to think a little bit about what does it mean to nurture hope as an action and a verb rather than simply a feeling. Feelings aren't sustainable. Like if I did threw up the feelings wheel we had right at the beginning, you might be picking a different feeling, you know? And if that's anything that we learned from Vivekji and from our community here is that so much, all we change is only constant. So much is changing. And so hope is when we treat hope as just a feeling, we're attaching ourselves to something that isn't staying steady. So another framing I want us to embrace and consider is hope as a discipline. And there is a Black feminist author, Mariam Kaba, who's an abolitionist, um, who talks about hope is a discipline. And I'll read the quote, and you can read along with me. And she shares that it's less about how you feel and more about the practice of making a decision every day that you're still going to put one foot in front of the other, that you're still going to get up in the morning. It's work to be hopeful. It's not like a fuzzy feeling. You actually have to put in energy, time. You have to be clear-eyed. You have to hold fast to having a vision. It's a hard thing to maintain, but it matters to have it and to believe that it's possible to change the world. And I think you can see really explicitly in the example of the Flint water crisis, the ways that residents translated their hopes into more than just like, wait for the state to come help us, right? They actually translated that into action. And you could also use the word active hope, right? It, it's acknowledging that, you know, if we're using more of a Vedantic sort of framing that Bhagwan is giving his hand, we need to put our hand in his hand and do the work, right? Not just hope that it magically happens. And then what's beautiful here, I think, is that when, things like cultivating time, energy, clarity, maintaining vision, those are all things we can do. Like, oh, suddenly there's like, I feel like a lot more relief. Hope feels vague, but when a hope becomes a practice, it becomes so much more accessible and we can do it together. And in this vein, I want you to think particularly right now, as there's so much deepening unrest and a lack of safety within our communities. Like, think about where you can invite more friction in your life, right? Like, and this is where the pearl is such a beautiful metaphor that it's like through the friction of the sand that the something so beautiful, so special emerges, the pearl. Um, and for in some ways, maybe for some of us, it's like um, canceling Amazon Prime subscription because of the ways it's linked to ice. Maybe for others of us, it's like thinking really carefully and clearly about um, how we are relating to food wastage. That was something that came up a few times in the chat. Maybe we're thinking about like, hey, I think there is a group that is like looking at some protecting our water resources in our area. Okay, like plug into that. So where can you invite a little bit of friction? And the reason I say it's friction is that it's generative. It's generative. The pearl, it makes that friction kind of worthwhile. And like being part of the loving earth community is also inviting maybe a little bit of friction in good way, right? Like being in community is annoying. But it's beautiful and you have to do things together and sometimes you don't agree and sometimes you do agree and I'm saying this lightly, to just like kind of name that some of the skills that all of you are practicing with, by being in this space, participating in this space, and working with each other is part of becoming pearls yourself. And then finally, um, one of the folks I love, really, whose work I really love, is the eco-philosopher and activist, the late Joanna Macy. And she wrote a beautiful book called Active Hope. And she talks about doing work that reconnects. And this is a spiralic cycle, meaning like you go through it once and you go through it again and you might land in a different place. And it's about relating to our environment and to our earth. And first is starting with a lot of gratitude, which many of you named in our chat that actually, what do I love about our water systems? I love the Great Lakes, guys. Like I love that they look like oceans and they're so big. So like starting with a place of gratitude and then honoring our pain. This one gets forgotten a lot. And if we forget to honor our pain, we just end up with a lot of toxic positivity, right? Like, oh, should be grateful for what we have. Well, that's hard to feel if we don't acknowledge what we've lost. So how do we honor our pain? Like, it makes me, it like, it, it makes me sad that when I visit this lake, it doesn't look the same anymore. Or it makes me sad that, let's say I was in India, that like the monsoon doesn't happen in the same way. Like, there's so many songs that have been written about the monsoon season, right? Like, but the weather is not like that anymore. So how can we actually honor that we feel things about what we've lost that may not be able to be regained, right? Like what Rachna ji said, children who have lead in their system, they have lead in their system. Like the, you know, for any species that have become extinct, they remain extinct. And then seen with new eyes. I think once we have created space for our pain, then we're able to see, like, get to a place of a kind of acceptance such that we can take a more creative sense of the landscape around us. And then, of course, going forth with active hope that this is not a static thing. This is a thing that demands that we start doing more and more. So, like, coming here is a great start, but this is not where it should end. And I say this not as a calling out, but like cool, like an empowerment calling in and encouragement. Like, let's go forth together. And our Loving Earth team has a lot of ideas of how we can bring that to life this year. So thank you for letting me go 5 minutes over. We'll pause here and hand it back to our team.
Hariom, everyone. Thank you. Thank you so much, Nina. And thank you, Vivekji. I know he's probably resting right now, but Nina, I think for us with Loving Earth, we had this sort of very ambitious thought of what this could look like. And I just want to thank you for really putting a lot of words to some of the things we've been feeling and like what we can do going forth. And I love that we've sort of ended with that because now that we're at the end of the workshop, we're really not at the end, we're really at the beginning. So this platform is for us to kind of, we're in our 5th year of Loving Earth Sangha, and what else can we do? Like Vivekji said in the beginning, there's so much more we want to do, we can do. So we're going to take time to do that. We don't want to just say, okay, today I'm doing this and I'm done. So we're not going to meet again like this till April, but in between that, we need all. There was 55 of us here originally, but all of us who are here, please join our WhatsApp group. Let's continue the conversation. We'll talk about these things that we've heard today. We'll revisit them, and then we'll talk about innovate, think about what else as a community and a Sangha we can do. So looking forward to all of that. Thank you so much, Nina. Just a couple of so our next workshop will be in April. We also have a Loving Earth retreat in April. So April ends up being like our Earth month, like we know that in society, but it's turned out to be that way for us here too. So we'll see you on WhatsApp. We'll see you at the retreat in April. And just thank you everyone for being here. Thank you, Nina. Thank you, Vivekji. And we'll end with Shanti. Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. Carry on, everyone. Thank you.